Good afternoon to you all. I'm very happy to be part of the CPR Foundation's seminar. And the title of my paper is Ports, Harbors and Networks of the West Coast of India, Early Historic Period. India has been a major maritime region right from the Harappan times or even before that. Its central position in the Indian Ocean made it as one of the key areas in the Asia, Africa, Eurasian network covering all around the Indian Ocean. And this particular map indicates the centrality of India between the Western world and African world and also the Eastern world. And India is hanging like a honeycomb into the Indian Ocean, providing a kind of launching platform on its west coast as well as the east coast, connecting both these regions. In addition to that, India itself has been a major center of culture where people have been consuming resources, developing their own culture. One of the problems related to the maritime trade in the early period has been to looking at India as only as exporter, only as a person, only as an agency trying to earn wealth through export, not as an agency of consumption. When we look at the archaeological remains that are coming up now, and also if you critically look at the text, you can understand that India itself was producing commodities for its own market apart from sending it elsewhere. So far, scholars have been highlighting the exports and earning wealth. It is not always true. People were consuming in the hinterland. They were producing things originally for their own consumption. Later on they found it to be very attractive for selling it in the market. So basically they shared what they had produced for their own consumption at some particular point of time. Then they started learning things, borrowing ideas, getting new ideas across the Indian Ocean, and also they enriched their own cultural elements. So if you look at the kind of imports coming into India very critically, you can see these people were entrepreneurs. They were producing different kinds of textiles, perfumes, and they were using it for their own market, and they were also sending it. So this kind of two-way interaction should be seen very clearly, which was missing in the early perception. We were thinking of only about Rome or West or other region. We were also ignoring the relationship with Southeast Asia to some extent, and also Africa, West Asia. Things were centered around Rome, in the sense that Roman Empire, though people were very clear that Rome did not mean only Rome, it is the entire Roman Empire. The idea of Africa or other regions were marginalized. This was one of the problems, and this early map of Periplus, sites referred to in the Periplus, very clearly demonstrates how there were numerous urban centers across the Indian Ocean. If you look at the coastal areas, some of them are definitely urban centers, some of them are really just ports. You cannot call them as urban centers. So some kind of urbanization I would call as a fragmented urbanization. Earlier in our paper, we have discussed about urbanization in South India. Rather, I think we should qualify it as a kind of fragmented urbanization, which has impact at the key nodes and network at several key points and political headquarters. Whereas the long distance trade was happening all across, impact was all across the landscape, but the urban elements were occurring only at some sites. That we should remember. This map clearly demonstrates that, and these trade networks, people started interacting more actively, mainly from the first million, mid first millennium BC, At first, in the Indian context, these inland networks developed, and we know about Uttarapada, Dakshinapada as the important trade routes. And here in my paper, I am presenting five key networks of South Asia, five key regions where you have evidence of ports and urban centers in the coastal area, supported by the hinterland, whereas India or South Asia was not supporting itself. It was also a market for region beyond, for regions like China, and other areas, parts of Asia and Europe and Southeast Asia. So India should not be seen in isolation. It is part of the broader network of Afro-Eurasian region. That is very important. You can look at some of the areas where these ports are located. This particular map shows all kinds of ports. This is from Dr. Srila Tripathi and Gaur's paper. This map amply demonstrates coastal area having some kind of unique geographical features. They were point of connectivity, what is known as Dwar or Dwarka, some kind of entrance to Indian landscape. So the port should be seen as some kind of entrance to different parts of the landscapes, where I place one important region around this Gujarat Maharashtra corridor. Second is Karnataka Kerala coast. Third is Coromandel coast, in which I also include southern Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Then we have Bihar, Orissa, Bengal coast. So and Sri Lanka is the another area. So thus I see five important networks of coast where you have all the trade routes converging, and these ports were also acting as a kind of hinterland for the entire Asian or South Asian region. So looking at Periplus, when we look at the description, Periplus is a very informed, very intelligent text. I am using translation from Lionel Cousin, where very clearly the Periplus lists the areas and the landscapes, political entities, cultures, commodities. It is really a wonderful text, I feel. We need to read the text very closely in order to understand the maritime connections. It starts the description of India or India, before independence, it talks about Scythia, which refers to Pakistan, Afghanistan, that region. It refers to Sindhos, Indus as Sindhu. That is a very important the description of geography. It also has minute description on the landscape. Then it also refers to the port of Barbaricum, and Minagara, probably located in the Indus River region. Some people have suggested Minagara could be somewhere interior, and Barbaricum was on the coast. What is more important is in that point of time, it also reports that evidence of Alexander's invasion is seen in this region in the west. That is one important thing. And also, the Barbaricon becomes the first important port in South Asia, and it was in the control of the Parthians. That is how the text refers. And a very interesting description is presented on this Barbaricon. So it talks about the important port of Barbaricon, which is very close to the mouth of the river, and then commodities are taken inside. That is very important, because the things were consumed inside and the traders were coming. So they were broadly catering to the entire region. And more importantly, it talks about the commodities that were sold here, commodities that were exported here, clothing. It says with no adornment in good quality, printed fabric in limited quantity, and probably these people were producing printed fabric like what we have in the dress pattern of the priest, so-called priest image from the Indus Valley, it probably has the printed textile image. And here Periplus says they did not demand much. Probably they were producing multicolor textile. Peridot is a kind of precious stone, coral, storax, and frankincense, glassware, silverware, money, wine, all that it is being supplied. So it clearly indicates that these things, objects were consumed by the local. As a return cargo, it offers costus, bdellium, lycon. So these people were offering a lot of natural product, plant product, which were used as medicine, perfume, precious stones, and also goods from China, cloth, yarn, indigo. So this is something very important as far as the entire South Asia is concerned. We get to know that the Indian ports as well as hinterland supplied a lot of goods, and also they consumed. Whereas in our single unilinear narrative, we always talk about export, but we don't look at the quantity of the goods that are consumed by the local people, which clearly indicates there were, powerful systems existing. Powerful, I wouldn't say state as such, some kind of political formation. We know obviously in the Mauryan and post-Mauryan period there were polities. In southern India also there were polities. Some of these would not be like a state as an entity. I would suggest that it emerged very strong only in the colonial period. Pre-colonial states were some kind of entities. Sometimes we tend to exaggerate. I am not arguing there was no state, there were states, but they cannot be compared to the states during the colonial and the modern period. This is the pattern repeating all along. So the description in Periplus is very nuanced, describing about all the goods and the landscapes and the high tides. And then we have several ports along the Gujarat coast also. Barigasa or Bharuch is one important port, and this finds reference also in the Jataka text. We have a reference in Supraka Jataka, referring to 700 merchants, navigating from Brihkacha, or which is Baroch, which is Barigasa, to Southeast Asia, probably with the guidance of a navigator who was blind. And we also have Janaka Chadaka, referring to people moving from the western coast. Actually, if you look at the Gujarat region has been one important outlet for entire, northern India and northwestern India, and there were trade routes converging in this region, Gujarat and Maharashtra region. And we have also the port of Hatab, which is identified with Ashtakapra, for which we have later references. Archaeological Survey of India, Pramanik has excavated this region. And also several scholars have worked on the sites. We have Vadnagar, where hinterland site, where they have a museum, evidence of Buddhism coming up. And then we have ports like Gokha, and also we have other ports further down. We have Kamraj or Kamoni, identified with Kamoni, and we have a lot of important development. Similarly, Bara Dexima, identified with Porbandar. Then we have further down Sopara and Kalyana. This description of Barigasa also refers to one metropolis of Minnagara. We have reference to Saurashtra, which is identified with Serastine. And the description also very interesting. It says that this region is very fertile, produces grain, rice, sesame oil, ghee, cotton, and very perfectly matching with the entire agro-pastoral produce of Gujarat and Indian cloths. Gujarat is one of the important region for textile. There are great many herds of cattle, and men are of dark skin in color. These are some of the important description. It also talks about the region of Minagara, which is hinterland. So clearly, India has been one of the important producers of commodities. Culture, which is not very developed, cannot produce. So basically, these people were producing commodities there for their own consumption and usage. And later on, what happens when this long distance trade happened and this production centers get remodified, they started supplying things for the market. At this point of time, some kind of cosmopolitanism emerged. Cosmopolitanism in the sense people were trying to consume commodities from far off land, at least in some select urban contexts, and they were also supplying goods for the interior market. So they had to produce goods in order to obtain. So they were simply producing ceramics like rouletted ware dish, red polished ware, and glass beads, which could be easily sold. Instead of always metalled money, they could be selling these commodities so that they could get local produce, like mainly plant produce, as a different kind of perfumes, different kind of essences, tree resins, and all that could be used for various purposes, including so we get very clear reference. Baroch is very importantly located in the Narmada river, and it was also catering to Ganga and Gandhara and southern India. And there is a reference to Mambanus, which is identified with the Kshatrapa king Nahapana. And it is said he offered a pilot port. Some scholars tended to interpret this as a kind of competition between this Shatavahanas and Kshatrapas. It is possible. And these kings, these polities were also supporting. Similarly, we have a beautiful narration on Pattanam, this Chera king driving the ships, in which he banned the other ship, which comes from Sangam literature. Though Professor Gurukal, Rajan Gurukal, tended to undervalue some of these polities of southern India, if you look at very carefully, that you can understand these polities were powerful. You cannot call them as a kind of state. They were kingdoms, or somewhere in between state and chiefdom. They were equally powerful, controlling the territory. We have clear textual references, and they were not simply narrating stories. Whereas I agree with the Gurukul that we cannot compare these early historic polities as a kind of state. Rather, I would call them some kind of political formation. This is where I call this Gujarat coast as an important region in the maritime network, and we have nuanced descriptions in the literature. In the Greek literature, there is a reference to Ashtakapra, which has been identified with Hathab, and the coastal conditions, high tide, navigation, all that is discussed. And we also get reference to Osin, which is identified with Ujjain, and the commodities that were traded here are also spoken in the literature. So that is something very important. And here also, if you look at the items of trade, they also, the market, it is a market for wine, Italian, Laodicean, and Arabian, copper, tin, lead, coral, peridot. So clearly people were importing precious stones. Probably they were working on, and they were also exporting different kinds of things. For the king, there was imported in those times precious silverware, slave musicians, that is very important, beautiful girls for concubinage. So you can clearly understand the connection, movement of people, commodities, and ideas. So they were probably importing yavanas, or sometimes people could have come from Africa, or different communities across the Indian Ocean. We have such depiction on a pottery from Arakankulam. Fine wine, expensive clothing with no adornment, choice unguent. So perfumes, and the area exports nard, plant product, costus, bdellium, ivory, onyx, agate. Again, if you look at Pattinapalai Tamil text, clearly says Vadamalai Piranda Ponnum Maniyam. So clearly, this when you talk about Vadamalai, it could be taken as entire belt of Gujarat to down to central India and Orissa, from where a lot of stones are coming. So the claim made in Pattinapalai is verified by the description in the periplus to the region of the hinterland of Barigasa. This is something very important. We have also Chinese goods coming to Barigas or Baroj. Probably we can understand that these people from the hinterland, they were moving commodities to the convenient point. That is why we can call at least four important centers like Baroj and Gujarat, Maharashtra coast, and Musiris and the entire Kerala Limerick coast, and Archimedu and Adahankulam and southeastern India and Sri Lanka. Similarly, and Bengal region. These were the key points where traders were moving in large number, whereas the other ports were also important. They were catering to small market. So the coastal navigation was very important at that point of time. So people were started supplying goods for these market, which is amply demonstrated in the literature also, where and also in material culture. We clearly, when we excavate sites right from Iron Age to early historic, we see plethora of material objects moving across. This is something very yeah, important. That is why these ports became very important. Now we call South India only as Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Andhra, but this Dakshina Pradesham or Dakshina included even Maharashtra. So here you can find the equivalent of Dakshina Bades, as a Greek form of Dakshina Pradesham, a Sanskrit word. And then we have reference to all kinds of wild animals here. So these people were also dealing with wild animals and their produce, and sometimes humans enslaved. So they were also, clearly describing the landscape, animals and plants. It's basically environmental history that we are dealing with. It is not just economic history. Economic history intertwined with political history and cultural history, and all that is together described in this text. And also there is a reference to Thair and Python. The distance is very clearly spoken. I'll not be, these facts are already known. My intention is not to go into the detail. We have reference to Suparaka and Chaul and other ports along these coasts, and then Kalyana and all these Kalyan, what is now known as Kalyan, they were also important center. We need not always think that everybody went to only to Baroch or Bargasa. See, these intermediate ports, they had their own market, because when people go in large scale, what really happens in Bangalore's traffic, Similarly, this kind of pattern existed. People expected, they started moving to smaller or other regions for sending their commodities. Even these major traders might have concentrated in the major ports. Other people, they were trading in the other markets. So clearly the trade was two-way process. It is not one way. We have clear reference to Nowra and Tindis as the first ports of Limerick. We have evidence from archaeology as well as literature, Tamil and Sanskrit, and also Greco-Roman literature. We have reference to Tindis or Thondi of Tamil literature near Calicut, which has not been identified, and very clearly it says that Musri's region also catered to the Ariake region. So sometimes these trade activities were inter-regional. You cannot see that, you cannot always think that Gujarat or Maharashtra traded with that. It is multi-directional. Sometimes ships were coming from Gujarat to Kerala, Kerala to East Coast to Bengal. This was also important. This is where the hinterland network, when we talk about, it is not necessarily through the land. They were also using the navigation. It is much easier for them. They were using basically hinterland to move goods. Sometimes they were also transporting goods. It depends upon the geographic location. So we have clear description of Musiris, and these are some of the ports where you know about Musiris and Pattanam, where KCHR and PJ Cherian, Shahjan, and we were involved in excavating, and excellent work has been, has come out of these excavation, and KCHR, and then now Pama is excavating, and now KCHR has excavated a important site called Anapara in the Western Ghats in the Cardamom region, Cardamom Hills, where they are finding a lot of cornelian, agate, and very fantastic materials, including iron objects. So that suggests that how these early historic trade network penetrated deep inside. So we cannot just see that these developments happened only along the coast. The hinterlands were very actively involved, and these communities, so-called tribal communities, all of them were involved, local farmers. They also probably modified their activities to suit the market, and we have brick structures from Pattanam, different kind of structures and material. I'll not go into the detail. And then we have reference to Bakare and Nelkinda, which have not been identified, and there is a detailed description what kind of goods that are being exported. So clearly, pepper has been one of the important produce, pepper, cardamom, all of which they have identified here. And the most important is the connection between the Bengal coast, where we are finding a lot of material culture, mainly rouletted ware in large volume. Probably in West Coast, you find rouletted ware in much larger volume at Pattanam. And this is the extent of the rouletted ware network. If you say Gujarat was dominated by the red polished ware network, East Coast had this rouletted ware network. So we are able to understand all the material culture. Again, when we talk about the maritime connectivity, Red Sea route and Persian Gulf. Persian Gulf route we always ignore. Persian Gulf route was one of the oldest route supplying commodities right from Indus Valley times. We have evidence of Persian Gulf material like Saudi Arabian ovoid jars and other kind of bitumen coated pottery, torpedo jars, all occurring at Adakankulam and Arikemedu. It is in limited quantity, and Pattanam. So clearly there were 2-3 networks. Similarly, Southeast Asian network, we are not able to identify Gujarat and Bengal. They were all very well connected with this region. We also have clear reference to East Coast sites, Kumari and Kolkoi, which is Korkai and Kamara and Sopatma, Pudukai, and I'll not go into the detail. And coming to this maritime work, underwater archaeology work, S.R. Rao and NIO Goa, Sila Tripathi and Gaur Sundaresh, they have all done work. Currently, ASI is doing underwater work at Dwarka. They have found important remains. I'll not go into the detail. These are all from their publications, clearly indicating connections dating back to an early period, suggesting the dynamic coast that existed here, where things are sometime under the sea, sometime under the sediment. This is one of the problem even in Kerala, where we have early reference to teak occurring in the references in the Bible, and also in Ramses II's mummy we have evidence of pepper, which could also indicate early connection. We have excavated a Neolithic site where we have found shells as early as 1600 BCE. So definitely suggesting these maritime network existed. We have evidence of cinnamon in Israel, turmeric in some site of Megiddo. So clearly indicating continuity of trade in the post-Harappan period. We stopped maritime connection post-Harappan period and moved to early historic. It is true, there were two concentrated temporal extent. One is Harappan, the second is early historic. But in between also trade happened. For that we need to research more. This is the underwater survey by Dr. Alok Tripathi at Princess Royal in Lakshadweep. And then we have important shipwreck coming from Godavaya, which is also very important for understanding the trade pattern. I have taken Sri Lanka also. When you look at West Coast, you cannot see it in isolation. It also connected with the East Coast and Sri Lanka. We have shipwreck where they have found black and redware pottery, glass ingots, and these kind of querns, and so many other materials. Stone anchors, one of the important material along the coast, and Sila Gujarati has documented many, and we have also found late period stone anchors. This is from Bepur in Kerala. Bepur is another boat building site, and also oral tradition. I'm just citing here the Sikotra Mada. If you look at Kanyakumari, Kumari is mentioned in the early Periplus and also in Tamil literature. Here they say Kanyakumari. Kanni is translated as Sanskrit. Actually, Kanni means sea. The fisher folk in South India, they look at sea as a mother. Kadal Amma they call. If you Google, you will see a lot of Kanniamman temple. Right from Amalapuram, there is a Kanniamman temple where the Irula tribes are worshipping now. Kanni is basically sea. The hinterland community of Irulas, they come to the sea and worship, because during the time of probably drought, these early hunter-gatherers from the hinterland moved to the coast, mainly not just to the coast, the backwater area where they could fish. So this is the connection which we find in the later day oral tradition. That is why oral traditions are also important. In a conventional mode, we think only the inscription is the source. That is why I call we need to deconstruct inscription, where oral tradition and ethnography plays a very important role. Sometime in our historical perception, we have been molded by old tradition and colonial notion, saying that epigraphy is the only source. Everything needs to be supported by epigraphy. Not necessarily oral tradition, but oral tradition needs to be handled very carefully, because there could be concoction, modification, but still they could help us to understand certain clues. This Sikotra Mada, it refers to Socotra, that is an island of Yemen and Omani coast, and which was a key point where they have found Gujarati as well as early Brahmi inscription that has been published, and the perception of Kanyakumari, where there is a goddess, probably goddess, this goddess was the sea goddess that was positioned in the tip where people were taking sacred bath. So coming to the network, already I discussed the network. I'm running short of time, I'll not go into the details. So the coastal service, I'll come to the discussion and conclusion. Coastal centers were acting as a point for serving the hinterlands. We have 3-4 networks already. I mentioned Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Odisha, Gujarat with key nodes. And also Sri Lanka. So Indian ports were very dynamic. The trade was a two-way process, and local people did consume non-local communities. They also modified and exported. That is a very important point that we need to look at, and more investigations needed to identify the ports that have been unidentified, that are mentioned only in the text. And also we need to focus on these time gaps between Harappan and early historic, between early historic and the medieval. So these areas need to be concentrated. I would like to thank Dr. Nandita Krishna and also Dr. Balaji and other fellow delegates. Sorry, I could not come and attend because of some urgent meeting. However, I hope this will raise some questions. Thank you.